we modeled the impact of an excise tax on the market. The government comes in and imposes a per unit tax on producers. Gasoline was our model. And one thing that we found was that the impact of the excise tax was to increase cost, which basically made the supply curve shift up, or you can think of it shifting back towards the vertical axis. Let's put our picture together with price on the vertical axis and quantity in terms of gallons of gasoline on the horizontal axis. And we'll start with a demand curve that looks like this, D0, and a supply curve that looks like this of S0. And we said, let's just start with a pre-tax world of price of gasoline being $2 per gallon, and that many units of output is the equilibrium out in that market. Now we impose a $1 per gallon excise tax, per unit tax of $1 a gallon. And if you were to ask most people, in fact economists have done this, taken polls of people and say, suppose the gasoline price is currently $2 a gallon and we're going to put a $1 a gallon gas tax on, what's going to happen to the price of gasoline? 99% of the people polled on the street say it's going to go up to $3. It seems right. It's $2 now. If you add $1, it's going to go up. But as we saw last time, what happens because of the imposition of the tax is that the supply curve after tax has gone up vertically by the size of the tax at any given output level. And what that means is that if this was $2, this gap is also $1. And that means that in fact the equilibrium price, which we'll say here is $2.45, has not gone up by the full $3. It's important that you recognize that while the consumers are paying $2.45, this $1.45 is all the firm gets to keep. The gasoline dealer, before the tax, got to keep $2, which he or she used to pay for their employees. And now after the tax, the price has gone up to $2.45 a gallon from the customer, but one green sheet of paper, $1 from that, has to go to the municipality who's imposed the tax. Okay? So this amount comes right off the top, so the net that the firm retains, which is $1 less than what the consumers shell out of their pocket, by definition, that's what the tax does, they've dropped that amount. So economists have a term for this. It's called the incidence of taxation. And the incidence of taxation just says who pays what share of the tax. In this case, you can see that consumers have 45 cents extra in terms of what's coming out of their pocket. So the consumer, the incidence on the consumer would be 45 cents, and the incidence on the firm would be they're losing 55 cents. In this case, the $1 gets spread between two groups. The incidence of taxation is the term the economists use to say who bears what share of that tax. And the way we've drawn this, it looks like consumers are getting off a little easy compared to firms. The problem with this thing is, no problem, that's the right analysis, but as you should start thinking about, this really depends on the shapes of these curves. So for example, let me draw another picture that hopefully will make this a little bit clearer. We'll put price on the vertical axis and quantity on the horizontal axis, and we'll have a supply curve that looks like this. But as I talked to you about earlier, the demand curve for gasoline is actually pretty steep. When the price of gasoline goes up, consumers complain about it a lot. They get mad and grumble, but they still pretty much buy the same amount of gasoline. There's some cutback. Maybe they'll carpool now and then. Maybe they won't take as many trips to the grocery store. They'll try to plan their shopping trips more frugally than they would in the past. But in general, the demand curve for gasoline is pretty steep. And what that means is that if you were to look at the pre-tax situation, which is the $2 gallon of gasoline, and Q0 gallons actually transacted in the market, and now impose a $1 per gallon excise tax, we know what happens. The supply curve will be shoved vertically by that $1 at any given output point. And so we connect these points. This gap is the $1. And of course, this gap is also the $1. Now look what's happened. Equilibrium in this case has gotten a much higher price. The new equilibrium price looks like it's about $2.95. And the firms looks like what they get to retain, because they have to give $1 up, they will retain $1.95. So everything else being equal from my earlier picture, all I've done now is to put a little bit more realistic, steep demand curve in there. And because of that steep demand curve, you see that in fact the vast majority of the gasoline tax is passed right on to the consumer. The vast majority in this free market equilibrium, the way the market determines price, given the responsiveness to price from the demand curve versus the supply curve, price is going to go up quite a bit. And in this case, the incidence of taxation would be 95 cents on consumers, and on firms, the incidence would be 5 cents. This difference between the previous picture and this one is because of the shape of the demand curve.